Hello, everyone. I'm super excited to have Daniel Todd, CEO of Influence Mobile, here with us today. I can't wait to hear about your journey and how you took Influence Mobile to 70 million in ARR. Would you mind just telling us a little bit about Influence Mobile so we understand what the business is?
That so when I first started the company, my goal was to build a company that used technology to influence people's future shopping. And uh, I obviously met you many years ago when we were doing that. So what it started at, it was a little bit different. We focused on real world shopping. Where we've moved to, we have a mobile app called Rewarded Play. It's in the Android App Store. We basically invite people to come and discover new games and apps. And when they play those games and apps, they earn real world rewards. And so the way it works is we get about 15,000 new people a day. They come in, they download the app, and we say, hey, pick 3 games, play those games for about an hour, and we're going to give you a $5 gift card tomorrow. And about half the people get started, and then, it continues to fall off. But what we're really doing is trying to find people that spend money in games, right? So, we built technology to try to do shopping. We've kind of focused on shopping within games. People spend an incredible amount of money. More money is spent in mobile games than in all movies, all concerts, and all sports combined. It's a ridiculous amount of money. And it's even crazier to think that most of that money comes from about 5% of people that play these games. So what we're really doing is we bring in this 15,000 people a day. We're looking for the people who spend money. And we give about 80% of our points to these people that spend money. So as an example, earlier this year, one of our top spenders spent $9,000 in games of our clients in 1 month. And
Insane.
we gave her $2,000 back in rewards, right? And now you could imagine if you're spending that much money and getting that much money back in rewards, you're not leaving, right?
Mhm.
You're gonna. So what we're really doing is we bring in these, what becomes roughly 5 million people a year to find the tens to hundreds of thousands of people who spend this money, and we create effectively like a cashback rewards model where they're
Mhm.
getting 10 to 20% cash back on what they spend. So then what happens is those group people stick around a really long time, which means every new game developer that comes and uses our product finds a very target rich environment, right? We disproportionately keep, and I didn't even mention this, typically females over the age of 40. So in this world of gaming, a lot of people like to think it's younger males that spend all the money, but it's actually the older demographic has more money. The older demographic spends more money. Women over the age of 40 typically spend about 60% more in games than anybody else. So we really cater our experience to that group. We have not dissimilar to like what they do in Vegas when a high roller comes in. We have a special program called Elite Rewards for these people. Give them very fast customer support, special bonuses. We send them company swag, and so our business is all about finding and keeping these high value people
Mhm.
engaged for app developers.
Okay, so when you're giving those swags, is that branded content of the game provider?
Uh, no, so just recently we started sending them shirts with our app, Rewarded
Okay.
Play. So we have a character named Armanda, who's this little robot hand that we kind of like engage the people with, and so it's really new. It's only been 2 months where we started to send people kind of this extra stuff, and so
Nice.
behind my screen here, I have racks and racks of T-shirts that I'm like literally packing up here and sending out. But the people are so thankful because, like, it's just a different experience. I mean, it's still not uncommon for people to think that what we say we do is just untrue, unbelievable. No one gives people gift cards for playing games, and so when we start to prove that we actually do this, and then we go above and beyond that, and like contact people and interview them and ask them what they like and send them shirts, it just blows their mind for a mobile app, right? So
I love that, the customer service as a differentiator there. And the fact that you're giving 2,000 back to 8,000 in spend, that's a really rich return, which you
yeah,
don't typically see. So
yeah.
that's amazing. I want to hear about how you found or fell into this and what made you decide to go into this space. And when did you know that, this is it, I found a market fit?
Sure. So I had built a company in the late 90s that was not totally dissimilar, wasn't in the mobile space. but we gave away free software. People would install a toolbar. The toolbar would show them ads, and the problem was is that people were wanting the reward they were getting was like a free video or a free game, and so when they'd see ads 2 weeks later, they wouldn't really connect it, and they were very, they called it spyware and adware and all these other negative problems, but it was super valuable to clients, right, to advertisers. And so when I started this company in 2012, I wanted to take all the things that I had learned, the good sides
Hmm.
about starting a company, and try to avoid all the bad parts. And so when we initially launched, as I mentioned, and that's when I met you, we were building these shopping toolbars for celebrities. And at the time, I think you were, we connected through
Caesar.
Caesars. Yeah.
That's right.
And so, the day when that started to ship, so that was working. We were building that. People installed the toolbar. We were making money, and we had a partnership with Lindsay Lohan of all people. And she posted one day on Facebook, and 9,000 people in 5 minutes came on their mobile phone, and we did not have a mobile app.
Wow.
And so we're like, okay, this is a problem. So we started building the same kind of shopping experience, click links and whatever in the mobile. And, the Lindsay Lohans of the world could get people to download it, but they just wouldn't remember to open the app and shop. So at that time, we ended up running across Facebook had just launched a team that was building Facebook Audience Network, where you could take Facebook ads and put it into your product. And so they said, hey, we're looking for people to experiment. And I said, great. Could I experiment by giving people points to try new things? And those new things are your games. And they're like, sounds great. So very quickly, that outpaced all of the revenue for celebrities. In fact, none of the celebrities would even let us run ads. They're like, we don't like ads. So we launched a new product called Louder Rewards, which targeted female fans of the Seattle Seahawks. I lived in Seattle at the time, and so players could earn actual like Russell Wilson jerseys and hats and shoes and whatever they wanted by trying new things. Those new things were Facebook ads, and it went bonkers. So within about 6 months, we were doing $3 million a month in revenue. Everybody was happy. Facebook was flying up, taking us to dinner. They're like, this is amazing. How are you getting this high click-through rates? I'm like, I'm literally giving people points to click on your ads. I could make it 100% click-through rate. So, but there was a fundamental problem, which was we didn't actually know what they were doing, right? It was a blind network. So they were clicking, we were getting paid. And so I kept trying to tell Facebook, I'm like, hey, what if you actually told me that this was the game and this was what they were doing? And they're like, it's not our data. We can't share it. And, I was like, let's agree to disagree. But the long story short was I knew if we couldn't get the data, we couldn't be ultimately successful. So we started building a product called Engage. Engage is what actually will generate us $70 million this year. And what I'm glad we did, because it was only a few months later where Facebook was like, hey, we love what you're doing, but we can't let everybody do it. So we're not going to let you do it forever. So sometime soon, we don't know when, we're going to turn you off. Well, that turnoff was January of 2016. Revenues went from 3 million to less than 1 million. And then that led us down a very dark path where we're like, okay, we had just grown from 7 to 50 employees. Now we cut from 50 to 25. I probably should have cut back to 7, but we basically took a very slow deteriorating path from 25 employees to 7 employees 2 years later. Thankfully, around that same time, we continued to advance the product, and we met I won't probably say them publicly, but a large games company that trusted what we were saying. We started working with them, and I could see that it was finally working. When a games company sent me what players were doing, when I rewarded people for doing the things that made the company money, that whole cycle really started to pay off. And so, even though we were in kind of a dark time at that point, I could see the whole thing working.
So when you get into these dark moments, and I'm sure during the journey of Influence Mobile and the iterations that you've gone through, you had those moments where you're like, this isn't quite working. I need to pivot. How do you go about assessing that? And what's that sort of rigor that you have to kind of do those pivots?
Yeah, I think it varies. I've talked before that I'm pretty big on transparency, right? So I think when it's a natural phenomenon when things are scary or that people want to kind of retract.
Mhm.
and they want to kind of make decisions on their own. I tend to try to do the opposite. If I'm unsure of the future, I'll have my own idea of a plan, but I want to talk that through with as many people as I can. I want people to poke holes in it. I want them to tell me you're crazy, and so when things got ugly, I would generally talk to my investors. I would try to talk to my clients. I'd talk to the employees, talk to everybody, and say like, here's where we think we're going, right? And I would generally try to do this, you know, when you're first starting out, you make zero money, right? You have zero money. So the only way that you can stay successful is you have investors who give you money. So I always felt like if I can tell a story that an investor can pay off, invest in, then I'm good, right? And so whenever we felt challenges, I was basically looping in those investors, saying like, here's where we're at, here's where I think we're going. Do you buy off on that?
Mhm.
If they didn't buy off on it, then I needed to know why. And if they did buy off on it, then that at least gave me the money to get to the next step. And I mean, we ended up raising, I think, over, from 2012 to 2016, about $6 million, but we got in a bunch of different tranches. Like we never just got $6 million. It's like 25, 50, 100, 25. Like we got small chunks because the whole time I was just talking to investors, talking to people, making those changes. And then we'd go do it. And many times, thankfully, the plan worked, right? Didn't necessarily get you all the way to the finish line, but it built up the confidence that you were going in the right direction. So then the investor might give you a little bit more money and so on and so forth.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought up the investor component. I do wanna ask you about that. Did you have some parameters around, "Hey, this is kind of how much cash infusion I really want within this period of time?" And, I mean, it sounds like you were really thoughtful about how you went about it, but did you have have some guidelines around when you went after investors to get more funds versus when you're saying, "Okay, you know what? We just wanna maybe hold for a bit while we're still perhaps developing a product or fleshing this out a bit?"
Uh, I'd like to say there was a plan, but it was more, your base, you wherever you're at, right? I tried to figure out, okay, I have this much money in the bank. I feel like I can make this much progress. I never wanted to get to the point where I was literally out of money. Now, being out of money in 60 days and being out of money tomorrow, two very different things. You can do a lot in 60 days. So I always tried to keep like a 2 month buffer.
Okay.
And so that doesn't feel like a lot of buffer to a lot of people, but it was enough for me because, literally the day I decided to come up with the company, I went and talked to our very first investor, who's a good friend and a board member. He gave me $25,000, and that's what I used to pay some bills and things like that.
Yeah.
And so like every single thing was just like getting the next piece, next
Yeah.
brick, getting the next part of the path built. The only time we ever raised big chunks of money was right after we did that Facebook deal, and like that blew up, and it was super easy. Like we got $2 million without even really trying. But most of the time, it was me talking to one or two individuals, getting them comfortable with what the plan was, and having them feel like, you know, Dan has a good chance of
Mhm.
getting it through. So no, there was unfortunately I never had this opportunity where I could get people to give me millions and millions of dollars till we'd proven things.
Yeah.
When we did get those millions of dollars, is then like 4 months later is when Facebook pulled back,
Wow.
and I think every investor was like, "Uh oh,"
Mhm.
like they'd seen that path happen too often. That's where we got into significant debt. We ended up taking $1 million from investors. We took a million. We owed Facebook $1 million because we basically couldn't pay them back, and then we ended up racking up other debt. So there was a time where we were 3 million in the negative. We were making cash. We were making $200,000 to $300,000 a month. So it wasn't like we were doing zero, but
Mhm.
the cash flow profitability was at zero, right?
Mhm.
So it's like you have $3 million in debt. You couldn't really grow the business because you didn't have enough cash to spend more money in marketing, and it looked like you were kind of trapped there. That was definitely a dark
Yeah.
moment.
And when you were in that dark moment, and I'm sure you had other points, did you ever think about, "Okay, this is it, like, I fold, I'm done, let's move on?"
I never really thought that way. There were times where I wasn't sure I could make it through, right? I
Mm.
never thought I'm kind of a glass half full kind of person, right? So I don't wake up with doomsday scenarios. I've faced doomsday scenarios, but there was a couple of times when we transitioned my co-founder out of the company, who's an awesome guy, where I hadn't been paid in 18 months. We were losing money. We needed to transition him out. He had kids he needed to feed. We needed to get him in a job. We needed to train somebody else up. Uh, and it was heading into this time in mid 2018 where I didn't even have money to pay rent. And it looked pretty gloomy at that point in time. But it just a miracle. I talked to a buddy of mine who I wanted to help give me a good place in India to try to technical help to replace my CTO. And he's like, "Oh, by the way, I'm selling my company next week." And why that was important was I had been a board member. And so out of the blue, like 7 days later, I had a check for almost $100,000 that literally is what kept the company afloat. And so, but then that gave us another kind of the biggest time I've thought about shutting it down. And I wasn't really thinking about it, but my wife was certainly thinking about it. We had just gotten this money. She's like, "Are you sure we should be putting this money back into this company?" And my very first investor and good friend was like, he's like, "You've given it a good shot. You should just shut it down," because we were going to have to like pay for overdue health insurance. So like there was a significant amount of the 100,000 we're going to have to give away, let alone keep to live on. And at that time, I just really felt like what I was seeing with this initial game developer was so positive that I'm like, I'd hate to quit right now. I
Mhm.
know it looks uglier than it's ever looked, but it also looks more promising from a pure product perspective than it ever looked, right? So I'm like, in reality, if all my investors could see what I see, they'd just give me the money that I would need.
Yeah.
And so I put my money where my mouth was. And if you look at like our growth trajectory from May 2018 until now, it's like 4,000%. Some crazy. My wife's happy I made that decision. My investors are happy. I'm happy. Um, but I was never really on this set where I was like, I'm going to just walk away. But I was posed that question.
Yeah, I can see that. I can see that. So now what's next? I mean, you've obviously have reached this point where you're hitting that 70 million annual revenue, recurring revenue, actually. So what are you focused on now?
So most everything that we've done has been in the US, so we're launching internationally.
Okay.
And most of the product success that we've had, we've only gotten from things we built several years ago. So we've grown over the last few years, but a lot of the dev teams new, product teams new. So we're kind of getting those systems in place. And so we have just a wave of new product advancements that are coming that I'd like to believe if they're half as meaningful as the things we did in the past, we're going to see huge improvements. So we have product innovation, we have international expansion. We bought one company. I'm looking and talking to other companies to purchase. So um, we get approached to be acquired all the time. I don't know, all the time, 4 or 5 times a year. That's a likely outcome. And so I've shared with our employees that I think we can get to $20 million in EBITDA as a run rate, and potentially more. But like I don't want to really sell till we get to that level. I think that's the potential that we have. So we rolled out a bonus program this year, so every employee gets kind of a profit sharing program tied to our EBITDA goals. So I continue to just try to be transparent, clear with what everybody is. Same thing that I used to do: talk to everybody and say, "Here's where we're going. Here, we're going to do
Mhm.
international. We got a product roadmap. We need this." And then I just spend a lot of time on making this a great place to work because we're in this new experiment, right? Everybody's working remote. It's harder to
Mhm.
build relationships with people. And so I'm experimenting a lot on what does it mean to build relationships in a Zoom world. And
Yeah.
you have to augment it with real world stuff. So that's all fun. I mean, that's new things, right? So grow the company, make it a great place to work. And I'd like to think that things will continue to work in our favor.
One more question, because you brought up the remote work and how you're trying to build relationships. What are some of the things that have worked for you in creating that culture?
So one of the most important things I think is, the relationships are the foundation, right? So you can get relationships a couple of different ways. You can build relationships, or you can hire people that you have relationships with, right? Like, you and I are talking because we had a relationship 10 years ago, right? And we have a connection that would be very hard to build up on Zoom in a short period of time, right? But we hung out for felt like months for a while. And so a lot of times when I'm hiring people, I hire people that I've already have a built-in relationship with,
Mhm.
or we get warm introductions from people. People come in, they like working here, so we hire somebody else. So number one, it's like how do you do your best out of the gate to get strong relationships, right?
Yeah.
I think I have 10 direct reports, and I'd say six of those direct reports I've known for between 10 and 30 years.
Wow.
So that just makes a whole different kind of dynamic in terms of how I build and maintain those relationships with people. For new people, you have to get them into meaningful work. You want to get them connected with people.
Mhm.
So we're taking our entire product and dev team to San Diego in 2 weeks. So there's work aspects of it, but over 50% of the value is just we're going to hang out, we're going to do a bunch of fun stuff together, we're going to talk about what we're doing in 2024. So, and this is the first year we've had the resources to do that. So you want to try to build a team that's got some strong relationships. That helps. You need to get some real world face to face time, and then we try to do as much as we can to build other. There's not always a reason for everybody to talk to everybody else in the company, but I try to come up with reasons. So like last month we did a lip sync contest where you got matched up with different people and you created videos, and like it seems silly, but it's just a reason for people to connect and have fun together. We have these other groups we just rolled out this month where everybody's divided across the company into teams, and then your team has to handle the birthdays for 1 month. So we're trying to make it so that you have to, like, you know it's Sandra's birthday. I need to find out what she likes. I'm not just going to send her, an Amazon gift card. I'm going to try to do some research. And so then those teams do the birthdays once a month, and then they also host one social event. So we've done murder mysteries and Among Us and all kinds of different fun things. We try to have, not everybody in the company cares to participate in those, which is fine. But we typically have 20, 30 people who get together and chat. So that's another key piece. And then kind of the dark horse that I like to give him a shout out, but we use this product called Hey Taco. It's a layer on top of Slack. And if I'm working with you and you did something really useful for me today and we're great, I can send you in Slack this taco.
Okay.
And it's just a peer recognition program, but our company sends out hundreds of tacos to each other each day. So it's so fun to look at the connections around the world of people. Somebody in Louisiana is helping somebody in LA. Somebody in LA is helping somebody. And we don't celebrate who gets the tacos. We celebrate who's giving the tacos, who's showing appreciation. So we have leaderboards of Sandra gave away 100 tacos, right? And we give people taco giving guru awards. And so it's really about showing appreciation to your coworkers, collaborating. And of course, there's a value to get tacos. You can get some swag and some free stuff, but that's kind of behind the scenes. And so all of those things can seem kind of trivial, but when you tie them all together, it creates a lot of meaningful connections on top of just the day-to-day work stuff.
Yeah. I love that stuff. I might have to borrow some of those
Please,
ideas for sure.
please do.
Globally dispersed team, it's something that we constantly have to be aware of.
Yeah. I mean, the number one thing is you got to be purposeful about it. You are not going to build relationships over Zoom by accident. That's for sure.
For
Right.
sure.
So, but that, like I said, to me, that's part of the fun. I'm planning on writing a book on this topic here in the next couple months. Did I tell you that?
No, I don't think I knew that.
So there was a study that came out on Wall Street Journal recently that said only 28% of remote work employees are engaged with their employer. And we were just recognized by Inc. magazine as a top place to work. And their survey showed 91% of our employees are highly engaged. The other 9% are just regularly engaged. And a lot of companies are seeing 20, 30% annual churn. We haven't had a person in our US team quit since 2018.
That's
Six,
amazing.
so
Yeah.
6 years. So I talked to a lot of different CEOs who want to know what we're doing. So I decided I would write a book from the perspective of the individual contributor. Like if I'm on a team and I'm supposed to be doing things, how am I successful in a remote environment? If you're a manager of those people, how are you successful? And for leaders, how can they be successful? And it's a team effort between all three groups. So I'm going to write a book that kind of highlights the various perspectives, relationships, transparency, the things that we've been talking a little bit, all become building blocks in making a good culture. So,
Wow,
uh,
congratulations on that 91%. That is phenomenal. Phenomenal, especially post COVID and where everybody's still trying to figure out how they're working together, this hybrid work mode, all of that stuff that we're still dealing with. So that's quite amazing that you've been able to achieve that.
yeah,
Really.
it's very satisfying. It's probably at least as satisfying as the business success, right? Like I
Mhm.
like there's a gal here who's been here the second longest to me. We hired her out of college. Her name's Megan. She's our VP of operations, and like she's probably worn 50 different hats, grown, grown in responsibility, grown in compensation, all these different things. It's just so satisfying to see. Like
Yeah.
as the company's engine is growing, it gives all these other people opportunities to grow and do new things, and then we just become one big team, right? So like Megan's advancements personally and drives the company, which makes it easier for us to hire Rick, who's a new guy who likes what he's doing, and like we all, and so that camaraderie, like I said, starts to build on each other. And as long as you don't ignore it, I'd like to believe if you don't ignore it and just keep it going, it's like a fire and it keeps growing. So
Yes, and I was going to say that whole the camaraderie that you have in your team and that purposefulness that you have actually translate to the dollars you're seeing today too
yep.
in the business. So 100% goes hand in hand. Now, I think Dan, I know what makes you successful and what's why and how you've achieved success. You talked about transparency. I've seen it firsthand. You're somebody who is very thoughtful in the entire time that we work together as well. But what are some of those attributes do you think that's created success for you at this point?
uh well, I like to treat people the way that I'd like to be treated. And when I do that and people believe that, there's an inherent level of trust that is conveyed, which when you have downtimes is very important, right?
Mhm.
If somebody knows, I mean, like I said, some of these people, my CTO and I have known each other for 30 years, right? We've gone through lots and lots of ups and downs together. So he knows I'm never going to purposefully do something to mislead him, to put him at risk. I mean, we're all at risk in the startup world, you know.
Yeah.
And so, whenever I'm dealing with somebody, whether it's an employee who we're putting on a performance plan, whether it's a partner, whether I'm negotiating to buy a company, I try to think, how would I want to be treated, right? Because I don't view all of these relationships as zero sum games. I view them as like collectively, how do we make it so everybody wins? And if you can get that reputation and people treat you equally
Yeah.
fair, that that overcomes a lot of things. And I just see a lot of people with more of a greedy mindset that they think it's a zero sum game, and then what they actually do is they shrink the pie. They don't worry about making the pie bigger and giving a fair share to everybody. And that's a shame, because a lot of people want to blame capitalism or this, that, or the other thing, and on on a lot of the inequities in the world. And I think it's just greed. Like, just be less greedy. Work
Yes.
work
Yeah.
as a team, share, become
Yeah.
a teammate. Right? Those are the things that I think help differentiate my style from others.
That type of messaging, it's relevant in the workplace. It's relevant in our base day-to-day life. I think some of that
For sure.
kindness and just being thoughtful, and then not always assuming that someone's coming from a bad place, right? All of those things are super important. Sometimes I think we get away from that a bit. So, Dan, thank you so much. I
Thank
love
you.
talking to you, and thank you for doing this interview with me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, absolutely.